Okay, today we're going to go over an economic system called capitalism. And today's going to be the overview and how capitalism works in theory, the major moving parts of it. Okay, and in previous lessons, we've looked over the definition of what the Industrial Revolution was and the factors needed to create the Industrial Revolution and make it grow. In this lesson, we go over capitalism, which is the basic economic theory if your society is based upon products, services, and what's known as the free market. In the next lesson, we examine how unregulated capitalism can and will go wrong. The definitions we need for today. Capitalism itself, a very simple definition, would be people or businesses producing and selling what other people want. Okay, producing and selling is supply, and people wanting things and buying it is called demand. The free market is just another name for capitalism. You'll hear both of those used interchangeably. The idea of the invisible hand, it means that capitalism runs and guides itself. It does not need direction from any one central power. That's why the hand that guides the system is invisible, because it's doing it itself. Not a vocabulary word, but a word very important is efficiency. Okay, you've probably heard it, but we got to start thinking, make sure we have a good definition. Efficiency is when you do something better, but not necessarily better. Faster, cheaper, with less resource cost, okay? To do something more efficiently, to get to your goal with expending the least amount of stuff you want to keep. Doing things better, faster, cheaper, with less resource cost. And finally, standard of living. This is a measurement of wealth and comfort in life. The more comfortable you are in life, the more we say you have a high standard of living. Usually, wealth leads to a high standard of living. Certain things under standard of living would be healthcare, would be conditioning the air, to comfortable levels, would be can you travel easily, and can you afford to travel easily? Do you have enough and the type of food you want? All of these, do you have entertainment? How many hours a week do you work? All of these go into measuring a standard of living. So let's get into defining and examining all the major parts of this economic theory. Okay, so what capitalism is and what capitalism is not. I do believe I do like that definition. So people and businesses, they produce and sell what other people want. So if there's a demand for something, somebody or a business is going to find a way to produce something and sell it to that person if a profit can be made. I guess we should add that to the vocabulary, okay? Profit is making money by selling something. So in the course of history, there are many different ways to set up an economy, many that are not capitalism, not people and businesses buying and selling, okay? The first humans were hunters and gatherers. They hunted, they gathered, and they basically, in tribes of 30 to 50, it was kind of like family sharing. No money, people shared. It was having the tribe survive, hunters and gatherers, very communal. Well, once people figured out how to farm, they started settling down and living in villages. It was still pretty communal, everyone in it together, but we start seeing some trade and barter, trading things. So some farm families would have extra and they would trade it for extra from other farm families. We started seeing wealth accumulation in villages, but it is not people in villages. People are not producing and selling what other people want. Everyone is basically doing the same thing. Capitalism is not communism. Communism is a fully government-directed economy where the government says what to produce, the government says how to produce it and for whom. We don't have a lot of buying and selling with money. Communism is a forced economy with the goal of the government telling everybody what they get, when they get, and how to work for it. And I would say capitalism really isn't colonialism. If you have one country owning another country, doing trade, that's forced trade. And the stuff that's happening in the colony is all forced by the government. So it's not really capitalism where people are buying and selling. I guess a very important part of capitalism not written here is that it's people and businesses freely producing and selling without interference from a government or something like that, okay? So, I mean, that is why we call another word for capitalism the free market. because it is voluntary that people produce and sell. So one of the main factors and one of the main parts of capitalism is a very, very strong incentive structure. Okay, so under capitalism, for all of these parts and all these factors, remember the star here. We have, depending on the size of your city, the size of your country, thousands to millions of people are constantly buying and selling their labor, products, services, resources, and in hundreds, if not thousands, of voluntary transactions every single year. So we say, why are people doing it? Well, in the grand scheme of things, each of these transactions is a win-win, and everybody wins transaction. So the theory goes, when someone buys something, they buy it because they want to. And when they get the thing that they wanted, their happiness, their satisfaction, their utility has increased because they wanted it and now they have it. Now, the person who sold it is receiving money for it, and the person who sold it wants to sell it to receive the money. So at the end of the transaction, the capitalist transaction, the person who sold the good is happy because they have money, and the person who bought the good or service is happy because they got what they wanted. In the end, both people walk away happier than they were when they came together. A win-win scenario. Here's some bonus information. Not all encounters are win-win, okay? We call it a zero-sum game, when there is a winner and a loser. And a lot of games are zero-sum. This was on the internet about negotiations, but I think what they're really getting here is the idea of a zero-sum game versus, obviously, a what's called positive-sum game. In a zero-sum, there is a winner and there's a loser. And these are usually in sporting competitions. And it's very rare for boxing or MMA or anything like that to be a draw. People want to see a winner and a loser. But in life, it's not always really that fun to have a winner and a loser. We want our interactions to come out win-win. And interestingly enough, for their negotiations, they use the example of a win-win, a capitalist transaction, a good for money. And because that's the classic, a buying and selling is the classic win-win scenario. Another part of the incentive of why capitalism works is that money is a powerful motivator to get people to do things. So for a large majority of people, the wanting of money is a reason they would get a job in the first place. Yes, I get it. There are people who would just work for the fun of it. But basically, if you want everyone to work, money is a powerful motivator to get people to work at their job. And it's also a great motivator to get people to work harder and better and more efficient at their job to get more money. Money is a motivator for businesses to want to compete to get the other business's business and be more efficient. So businesses compete with each other to get the sale, and businesses will research new ways of doing things to be more efficient so they'll make more money. And money is a great motivator for people to invent things and start a business. Many, many, many inventions and new ways of doing things weren't just created because someone wanted to spend time seeing if they could. It was created by somebody wanting to monetize and sell a product. Both happen, but without money, you never get that person chasing a product or a way of doing things for financial reward. Money is a powerful motivator. And an interesting thing about money is it continues to motivate. The very basis of money motivation in a capitalistic society is so someone works hard enough or works to survive. And once someone has the money to survive, money continues to motivate because then more money is wanting to be achieved, so comfort will be achieved. And then, for some people, not all, money continues to be a motivator so that luxury could be achieved. So even if you have enough money for survival, money still motivates so you then live comfortably. And for then some people, money is a still powerful incentive so they will work harder or invent new things to get luxury. One of the major factors and parts of capitalism is this idea of competition. The idea that there's not a monopoly. There's not just one person or one business producing the one good or the one service. Many different people will compete to sell or do the same thing. And when you think about it, the phrase, when businesses compete, everybody wins. Forget what company said that, but they're absolutely correct. When businesses compete, the nation wins, the consumers win, and businesses might or might not win, but businesses aren't people. Well, they actually are according to the laws of the United States, but that's a different story. When businesses compete, in my mind, everyone that's really a human wins. Because if you have two businesses competing for the same buyer, each business is going to lower their price to the lowest it can possibly be. If it's real competition, each business will keep lowering their price until because they want because a little bit of profit is better than none at all. So competition makes the lowest price. Competition also makes the most efficiency. Every business is always trying to produce a product cheaper because then they could reduce their price and be the business everyone buys from. Okay, they can pass the savings on to the consumer. Okay, why don't they keep all that profit for themselves? Nuh-uh, because it's competition, because pretty soon the other business will figure out how to make it cheaper, and then we'll get the price war down to the bottom again, and that's good for the buyer. Maybe a company will offer better service or a higher quality product. That's a way they compete with their competitors, and the buyer gets better service or a higher quality product. The buyer again wins. And maybe the business will work and invest money to advance their product. So it's not the same product, it's a better product. That's how they can get buyers too. So as long as we have at least two businesses competing, all of this will happen. The businesses will do it themselves. They'll lower prices. No one has to tell them to do it. They'll be more efficient. They'll have better service. They'll have higher quality. They'll make their product more advanced, and they'll lower their prices. All because they are competing for the buyer. Competition makes the buyer win. Now, competition is not good for workers. Think about it. If you have a lot of workers all competing for one job, all those workers are going to say, I'll do it for less pay. I'll do it for less days off. I'll do it for less health care. You got 10 workers, one job. Those workers are going to compete until the one who gets the job is going to be just good enough and paid very, very little. Competition is bad for workers because it drives wages down. But competition is really good for a nation's education and, in general, a workforce. Because all these workers are competing, they want to be better at the job than their neighbor. They want to be more educated than their neighbor. The competition for a job creates the best workers and most efficient workers. It's just, let me tell you, it's tough to be a worker when you're competing. But in the grand scheme of the nation, it produces very competent and very effective workers. So it's actually very amazing that capitalism makes itself. Capitalism and buying and selling and the organizing of resources, it runs without any planning. All you have to do is introduce money, which is the incentives, and competition, and everything organizes itself. No one has to say what to produce. No one really has to plan how or when or where. People chase the money because making money is all about filling what other people want. And people want things to survive and then be comfortable. So what's the most important thing about life? Survival. And you need things to survive. And the money and the competition to provide the things that make people survive, and the competition to provide people's necessities cheaper and better so you can get the more money, it really does take care of almost everything. See, the incentives, the dollars, it drives people themselves to find out what other people want or to invent new things to try to get more money, to find a way to produce goods and services and to distribute it to people. Humans are creative. And if humans have a goal, see, capitalism's goal is to fulfill, it's not, yes, it is to make money, but you're only making money because you're giving people what they want. Because you're not going to sell something for money if people don't want it. So the heart of capitalism, this is where so many people get it wrong. The heart of capitalism is not to make money. The heart of capitalism is to fulfill people's desires. And the base desires are survival. And the next desires are comfortable living. And of course we get to the ultimate desires of luxury. But think about those. The basics of capitalism is to fulfill people's needs and desires. Humans are amazingly creative, especially when you compete humans to be creative. You have all the power of the most powerful brains ever developed on the planet Earth, striving for one goal, not to make money, but to fulfill people's desires. And that's why the free market is its goal is to fulfill people's desires. And because of competition, creatively and efficiently, it will work itself out. It runs itself because the people are using their brains to come up with the goal to fulfill people's desires. Competition drives businesses to continually become more efficient and innovative. So all the things we think we want, new technology, people's desires getting fulfilled, efficient use of resources, that's the goal. And it's all done without planning because of competition, people thinking of new and better ways to do it, to fulfill those. You don't need a government to plan that. And in fact, we see when the government directs an economy fully, we get problems, and this would be full communism. We get problems because the invisible hand, the people are not released to solve the problems. So people's wants go unfulfilled because the government in a communist economy is the one who decides what gets made. And that means people don't get what they want. They only get what the government decides gets made. Innovation goes down because there's no incentive to actually make something better. Communist car. Car works, done innovating. Car works, no need to be safer, no need to go faster, no need to be better car. Car works, car done. No innovation on the car. No humans can make, in order to do any economy, there are millions of decisions, millions of resource use decisions, production use, where to distribute, when to distribute. An economy is actually, billions of economic decisions are made every single day in the United States. Billions upon billions. No group of humans can do it efficiently. And that leads when a little group of humans tries to make the major decisions in a country and run the economy like under a communist government, it always leads to shortages, overages, people don't get what they want, they don't get what they need, inefficiencies in creating things. Humans cannot run an economy. And of course, without the incentive is part of the invisible hand, which drives people to do things. There's much in communist economies where there is no incentive, there's much less incentive to work or to produce. So the last two main factors and parts of capitalism sort of go hand in hand. There doesn't seem to be any way around it that capitalism produces classes. And to be fair, classes of people have been around since the beginning of cities. I mean, it even goes further than economic. There's religious classes, there's respect classes from different jobs, and there's economic classes. So whether you're pure capitalism or modified capitalism, it seems to be 100% part of the system that there will be a certain amount of classes based on a different amount of wealth. And this to me seems obvious because it is tied into the incentive system. A major part of capitalism is the incentive of profit and money. And the only way to have an incentive with money is if you can do something with money, and not having or having money means you're somehow in some way better off than not having money. And so then you just get this idea of money having and money not having. You've got classes right there. So it is impossible to me. It seems to be impossible to take out classes totally from capitalism without taking out and destroying the incentive system, which is tied into the competition system, the factor, which it just destroys everything about why capitalism works. So what we get is roughly, when you look at it, you get a poor, which is struggling to actually have the necessities of life, working, which can pay for necessities but don't have a lot of disposable income to buy anything comfortable or luxuries. Middle class has all their necessities covered, but can buy more different things or accumulate wealth. And rich, which could easily buy luxuries and has more than comfort. Now, I will fully recognize that many people don't like rich, middle, working, and poor. Many people don't like multiple different classes. And that's definitely a debate worth having. Here's a bonus thought, okay? I get it. We can totally have a conversation of where we want classes to be nowadays in the 21st century. But at the time the Industrial Revolution did its capitalism, what did rich, middle, working, and poor replace? Many societies throughout all of history basically looked like this. Almost everybody was farming poor. Almost everyone was just farmers, and that's it. No choice, no nothing. Not starving poor, but farming poor. There was 1% that were wealthy landowning elite. Maybe 1% were religious elite who had a lot of money and elite and education. And the cities weren't a huge thing back in the day, but there was probably 1 or 2% of city working. Probably a little more than farm poor, but they're not rich or hardly middle class at all. They're city working. Now, these numbers can be off by probably 2, 3, or maybe even 5%, but it still holds the same idea that the class system of new capitalism with the Industrial Revolution replaces this idea that the majority of humans were farmers and that's all they could ever be, and they were always just farming poor. Not starving poor, just farming. And so a very interesting idea for you to think about is, like, what do you like better? Plus 90% of every human just being a farmer and a couple having any kind of education and wealth and luxuries or stuff like that? Or we get the class system. So if you're looking at this one or the other, you make your decision, because this was the changeover during the Industrial Revolution time. Now, okay, so that's an interesting thought experiment for back then, but now we look into, in the 21st century, what do our classes look like? Because now the world is divided, almost all of the world is divided into capitalistic class systems of rich, middle, working, and poor. And now we can have an educated talk for today about the benefits and the trade-offs, the pluses and the minuses of having a class system. So let's talk in capitalistic theory of why a class system shouldn't be that bad. Okay? So in capitalistic theory, the rich shouldn't be too rich, whatever that may mean, and the poor should not be too poor. That would mean the poor shouldn't be so poor in poverty that they're starving and dying because they don't have the necessities. In a theoretical good capitalistic system, everybody would be on the majority of people, not majority, there would only be very few starving poverty. And the worst that could happen is you're working for what you need to survive. That's in theory where it should be for a good capitalist system. In theory, in capitalism, one should have social mobility, meaning to move on the social ladder. Now, you might have heard of this, or it's sometimes said, rags to riches. And that, I don't necessarily like that term, although it really, people tend to remember it. And that's the major stories of what a lot of capitalists during the Industrial Revolution would tell, especially the big business owners. And many did this. They started out as poverty, literally starving to death, but through their own ingenuity and hard work, they became owners of businesses and became rich. Rags to riches. Now, that is very rare. Back in the day and today, it is incredibly rare. So what I like better for social mobility is this explanation. In a perfect capitalistic society that's running really well, if someone works hard and makes the right decisions, they can respectably move up the class system, possibly only limited to how hard they work and the right decisions. That would be a better way to describe social mobility, since even in the best conditions of humanity, rags to riches is extremely, extremely rare. The numbers in the studies do bear out, though, that it is fairly, I don't want to say easy, but let's say common for someone in a capitalistic system to move one place. If someone is in poverty, living in poverty, it is common with correct decisions and hard work to be able to work, to get up to working, getting the necessities paid for in a lifetime. If someone is working, just barely getting by, it is possible through the correct decisions plus hard work to get to middle class, have a little bit extra money. And if someone's middle class, it is possible to pop up to rich. And capitalism, this is a different story for some time later. The system is also set up to prevent the incredible fall down. If someone's rich, it is very common for them to pop to middle class. The other way, if someone's family's middle class, it is very common to pop to have things happen and pop to working for necessities. And if someone's just working for their necessities, it is common, not unheard of, for their family to pop into poverty. So in capitalism, there is the alternative going down. The final factor of capitalism is the idea that a rising tide lifts all ships. Many people, when they were writing about capitalism and they're thinking about capitalism, did recognize the fact that there are classes. There are rich, middle, working, and people in poverty. And the people who wanted to defend the classes used the idea of a rising tide lifts all ships. Now, I will explain it not in a defense of a class system, but more as a factor of capitalism that seems to happen. It seems that this, in my estimation, it seems that this does happen. So I'm going to present it as observable. So the idea is this. We know that capitalism creates new technology, efficiency, new technology advancements. And some argue that capitalism creates new advancements, technology, and efficiency faster than any other type of economic system. So what they use is a metaphor. Let's say we're starting with capitalism in the Industrial Revolution, even though it's been around since earlier, but it really got mass-produced machines going, really hardcore capitalism in the 1800s. And you got three different ships on the ocean. You've got the rich ship, the high-class rich, you got the middle class, and you got what they would call the poor. Small ship, barely getting by, middle class, little extra money to spend, rich, well, they're rich. And the standard of living is what healthcare everyone has, what entertainment, what life expectancy, what products, what access to education, what transportation, what luxuries people are, they can have. And the theory goes that capitalism raises the standard of living because that is something capitalism does. New technology, new inventions, new educations, cheaper goods. And so here we are in 2000. In 200 years, healthcare has gotten so good. Entertainment has gotten so good. Life expectancy has gotten literally 30 or 40 years longer, 30 years longer. Options and products, education is through the roof. So it is entirely true that a middle-class family in the year 2000 is living, because look at that water, look how high the water is living a life that a rich person, the richest business owner in 1800, cannot dream of the life a middle-class boat is living today, because capitalism as a system has raised the standard of living for everybody in the world. There is almost no one in the world now, on average in areas where life expectancy hasn't risen, where different types of goods haven't been provided, where entertainment hasn't been more. So the argument goes that, of course, in capitalism, there's rich, middle, and poverty class. But as the years go by, everything gets better for everyone. I'm not going to go so far as to say someone living in poverty today in the United States is better than the richest person in 1800. They're probably better than a middle-class person in 1800. You would have to examine the standard of living. The best things that are going for it is that healthcare and life expectancy nowadays has gone up so much. I'm not going to make that claim. I will make the claim that the middle class in a capitalistic society today lives better than the richest person in the 1800s. I will make that claim. Let me explain that with one more example. We would say the standard of living rises across generations. I am probably upper middle class, maybe middle class. My grandfather was upper middle class, maybe middle class. My grandfather and I, we got paid the same, okay? The same real dollars, okay? We work the same amount per year. We get paid basically the same amount. We're both the same class, middle, upper middle. And yet, I have so much more. I have better healthcare. I have more entertainment. I have more options for vacations. I have more products. My car is better. Everything has advanced. If I were to go back to my grandfather and say, "Hey, grandfather, tomorrow I am not going to give you a raise. You will still be middle class. You will still earn the same amount of money. But we're going to give you everything that Doug has." He would think he won the lottery, because the stuff I have within just literally 60, 50 years has advanced so much. So that's a real world example of the classes are still there. The classes are still the same. But the standard of living has gone up so much comparatively just between my grandfather and me, who are the same classes. And we can see this. Sometimes advancements are going so fast now that we can see this within a lifetime. So the advancements this used to be that the standard of living rises across generations. But now, because the advancements are so quick, you can start your life as middle class, and even if you never accumulate more money, in 20 or 30 years, the things you have are going to be so much better than when you started. Even if you're in a class that's working just for the necessities, by the time 20 or 30 years go by, even if you're still working just for the necessities, all those necessities, such as healthcare, entertainment, food, have gotten more plentiful and better through advancements. And so we're starting to see the rising tide lifts all ships as a theory, not just going across generations, but going within someone's lifetime. Okay, so that is an overview of the parts, the theory, the talking about how capitalism is supposed to work in theory and what makes it run. Next time, I talk about the reality, because the reality is capitalism by itself doesn't live up to the theory. There's a few things that do go horribly wrong because of human nature and because of limitations on the economic theory. So next time, all the ways capitalism doesn't live up to its promises and what society did to fix the problems that happened when capitalism was running at full speed during the Industrial Revolution. All right, thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging, Bella.